Have you ever seen the internet turn on someone so fast that an entire life-changing tragedy gets buried beneath outrage? Because that's exactly what happened to one of YouTube's most recognizable creators. A man who spent nearly 2 decades entertaining millions suddenly found himself at the center of one of the most controversial debates on the internet. Not because of a prank. Not because of a scandal. Not because of a career-ending mistake. But because of a deeply personal decision involving a child who was never born. Within days, social media exploded. Supporters rushed to defend him. Critics accused him of the unthinkable. Complete strangers began judging a situation they had never lived through. And as the arguments grew louder, one question remained buried underneath all the noise. What actually happened? Because behind every headline, behind every angry comment, and behind every viral post, there was a grieving couple facing a decision they never expected to make. And the deeper you look into this story, the more complicated it becomes. But what happens next changes everything. For years, Jesse Ridgway, better known online as McJuggerNuggets, built his reputation as one of YouTube's most recognizable creators. Whether you loved his content or not, there was no denying his impact. Millions of people watched his videos. Millions followed his journey. And over time, viewers felt like they knew him. That's one of the strange things about internet fame. People watch you for years. They see your victories, your failures, your relationships, your biggest milestones. Eventually, some followers begin feeling like they're part of your life. And that can be both a blessing and a curse. Because when something personal happens, everyone suddenly thinks they deserve an opinion. Earlier this year, Jesse and his wife Ashley shared exciting news with their audience. They were expecting a baby. For the couple, it was a huge moment. A new chapter. A new adventure. A new beginning. Friends celebrated. Fans congratulated them. Everything seemed to be moving in the right direction. Then came the news nobody was expecting. A medical test revealed that their unborn child had tested positive for trisomy 21, more commonly known as Down syndrome. At first, Jesse admitted he didn't fully understand what that diagnosis could mean. Like many people, he knew the term, but he didn't know the details. He didn't know the potential complications. He didn't know the range of health challenges that can sometimes accompany the condition. So he and Ashley did what most parents would do. They started researching. They spoke with doctors. They consulted genetic counselors. They talked with family. They talked with friends. And they tried to understand what their future could look like. Imagine that situation for a second. One day you're imagining birthdays, family vacations, first words, first steps. The next day you're sitting in medical appointments, hearing information you never expected to hear. No matter what side of the debate someone stands on, it's difficult to deny that this is an emotionally overwhelming position to be in. And according to Jesse, the more information they gathered, the more difficult the decision became. Eventually, after weeks of discussions and consultations, the couple reached a conclusion. A conclusion they describe as one of the hardest decisions they have ever made. They chose to terminate the pregnancy. When Jesse shared the news publicly, he already knew backlash was possible. Actually, scratch that. He probably knew backlash was guaranteed. Because the internet has a special talent. It can turn complex situations into simple arguments. It can reduce painful experiences into hashtags. And it can transform deeply personal decisions into public battlegrounds. That's exactly what happened here. Almost immediately, social media exploded. Comments flooded in. Posts started circulating. Reaction videos appeared. People who had never met Jesse or Ashley suddenly felt qualified to tell them how they should have handled one of the most difficult moments of their lives. Some comments were supportive. Others were compassionate. but many were incredibly hostile. According to Jesse, the response quickly escalated beyond criticism. He described receiving intense hate, harassment, and even threats. Think about that for a moment. A couple announces the loss of a pregnancy, and instead of receiving empathy, they find themselves defending their grief to strangers online. It's one of those situations that highlights how strange internet culture has become. People often talk about wanting honesty from creators. They want transparency, authenticity, truth. But sometimes when creators provide exactly that, the response isn't appreciation. It's outrage. Jesse eventually responded to the criticism directly. In a message shared publicly, he expressed frustration at what he described as overwhelming hate directed toward two people grieving an incredibly painful loss. He argued that many of the harshest critics had never faced a similar situation themselves. And because of that, they couldn't fully understand the reality of the decision. At the same time, he made something very clear. He wasn't attacking families who make different choices. In fact, he openly acknowledged parents who choose to raise children with Down syndrome. He described those parents as courageous. He said he respected their decisions. And he emphasized that every family has the right to make choices based on their own circumstances. That detail is important because it often gets lost in online arguments. The internet loves turning everything into teams. You're either completely right or completely wrong. You're either a hero or a villain. Real life doesn't usually work that way. Most difficult decisions exist somewhere in the grey area. And this situation is no exception. As the controversy continued growing, another interesting conversation emerged. Not about Jesse, not about Ashley, but about why stories like this are rarely discussed publicly. Jesse argued that one reason the story gained so much attention is because people don't often talk about these experiences. And when you look at the reaction, it's easy to understand why. If sharing a vulnerable personal experience results in harassment, insults, and public judgment, many people will naturally choose silence. That's human nature. Why open yourself up to attacks? Why risk becoming a headline? Why voluntarily become the center of controversy? Most people wouldn't. Yet Jesse chose to share the story anyway. Whether people agree with his decision or not, that choice created a conversation that reached far beyond his audience. Suddenly people everywhere were discussing prenatal diagnoses, difficult medical decisions, parental responsibility, disability awareness, reproductive rights, and the ethics surrounding all of those topics. It became much bigger than one couple, much bigger than one pregnancy, much bigger than one YouTube creator. The internet had turned a private family tragedy into a global debate. And as expected, opinions were all over the place. Some people argued that parents should have the right to make these decisions without interference. Others strongly disagreed. Many pointed to personal experiences with family members who have Down syndrome. Some shared stories filled with joy. Others shared stories involving significant medical challenges. The result was a discussion that became increasingly emotional from every direction. And that's where things became especially complicated. Because Down syndrome itself isn't a single experience. Every individual is different. Every family is different. Every outcome is different. That's one reason conversations like this become so difficult. People naturally speak from their own experiences. Someone who knows a thriving individual with Down syndrome may view the situation one way. Someone whose experience involved serious health complications may view it another way. Both perspectives can exist simultaneously. Yet social media rarely leaves room for nuance. Instead, people shout. Algorithms amplify conflict. And the loudest voices often dominate the discussion. Meanwhile, the people at the center of the story continue dealing with the reality behind the headlines. For Jesse and Ashley, that reality included grief, recovery, and processing an experience they never expected to face. It's easy to forget that when scrolling through comment sections, we see posts, tweets, videos, arguments. What we don't see are the quiet moments afterward. The conversations happening behind closed doors. The emotional weight that remains long after the internet moves on. Because eventually the outrage machine always finds a new target. A new controversy. A new debate. But the people involved still have to live with the experience. And that's perhaps the biggest lesson hidden inside this entire story. Not whether someone agrees. Not whether someone disagrees. But the reminder that internet discussions involve real human beings. Human beings experiencing real pain. Real fear. Real uncertainty. And real consequences. For nearly 20 years, Jesse Ridgway has lived life online. He's seen criticism before. He's seen controversy before. But according to him, this situation felt different. Because this wasn't about content. This wasn't about entertainment. This wasn't about views. This was about family. About loss. About a future that suddenly changed course. And regardless of where someone stands on the debate, it's difficult to ignore one reality. Nobody enters a situation like this hopping to become part of a viral controversy. Nobody wakes up wanting to be at the center of a global argument. Sometimes life presents impossible choices. Sometimes there are no easy answers. And sometimes the internet forgets that. As the discussion continues, one thing remains certain. The story has sparked conversations that extend far beyond one creator and his audience. Conversations about empathy. Conversations about judgment. Conversations about the cost of sharing personal experiences online. And perhaps most importantly, conversations about whether every painful decision needs to become a public trial. Because in the end, beneath all the headlines, reactions, and debates, there was a couple navigating one of the hardest moments of their lives. The internet saw a controversy. They lived a reality. And sometimes those are two very different things. The arguments will eventually fade. The hashtags will disappear. The headlines will stop trending. But for Jesse and Ashley, this chapter will remain part of their story forever. And maybe that's the part people should remember most.